Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our returning guest, Miss Melissa McShane, introduce herself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi, I'm Melissa McShane, and I am coming to you from a sunny morning in India, where it is a beautiful day. The sun is just rising, and there's a little bit of mist on the horizon, so it's really pretty. I write a lot of different fantasy novels in different subgenres of fantasy, including historical and contemporary and secondary world fantasy. And I am thrilled to be here to talk about my books today.
Oh, freaking standing. So in the next part, dear listeners, how we found them, and we can blame Jenna for that. So for good or bad, she gets the credit. Now, one of the cool things is if you followed her on her Discord, you get all kinds of neat things. Like we just found out she can girl like a boss. She managed to do whatever the girls do in those mystical salon places that they go to, where like they put their war paint in their fingers and their nails and their claws, whatever all that is. And she wrote while she was doing it. So magic.
Yep.
Those girl places scare me, so I avoid.
Well, here in India, almost all the stylists are men. And so you go into the salon and it's all guys. The ones doing the manicures and pedicures, the ones doing the hair, all men. So my stylist is named Thomas, and he is fantastic. He's very chatty. He likes to talk, and he knows everything about hair. It's amazing.
So when I was in Iraq, one of the AFES, which is the Army Air Force Exchange Services, they had their barber shop where a lot of people that were hired from India, because we were hiring from all over the globe, so we didn't have to pay American wages, so they could do it cheaper. So they got a lot of Indian hairstylists to come over. And one of the things they did differently that you don't really get here is not only do they cut your hair, they gave you like a neck and shoulder massage and a scalp massage when they did it. And I looked at the guy, and it was a husband and wife team because they tended to come in coupled teams. I don't know if that was the company doing it or just like, if I'm going to be gone for a way, like let's bring my wife and we can whatever. And I was like, I know you're married, but I'll marry you just so you can sleep home with me because I need this in my life. Right? His wife was giving me the stink eye though. She's like, no, he's mine.
No.
That was an experience with the head massaging and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Did that shock you the first time you got that when they were doing your hair?
No, actually, my U.S. stylist does that. She's very good at that.
Okay.
In fact, we teased her that she needs to open a service just for hair washing, so that you can go in and get the head and neck massage from her every couple of days. And she's like, I would totally do that. I would charge you for that. How much would you be willing to pay? But so she does it. So when they did it, it was like, oh, that's really nice. I don't have to give that up. But they do that, and they're all very, very good, very nice, very competent. So, but we're in Kerala, so
I've been into a hair salon once just to get it. It's like a great cut. So I don't know if it's a salon so much, just a hair place. But I went into one once just for a head, what do you call it, a hair wash. I was working in a warehouse and a box fell on my head and it was full of like dust and stuff. And it started like my eyes were swelling up halfway home. They even sent me home early for it. I'm like, yeah, JR, you got to do something. So I saw the sign for the hair cuttery and I got introduced to tea tree shampoo. And like opens my, like in addition to washing my hair, they got a washcloth and they got it really warm and they drape it over your face with the tea tree. So it was like I could breathe when it was over. And I didn't mind paying for a full haircut, even though all I got was the wash.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
I'm like, I got to try this at home. I do. I buy what I get at Walmart, but it is not the same experience as whatever magic they were doing.
Yeah. Well, when it's an expert.
When you get it done there, are they doing like traditional products or are they using what we get here?
It's the same products as the U.S. They have the same brands even. It's a little bit different because Indian hair is different from other, like all different races have, I guess, different hair but different than white person hair. And it's thicker And so Thomas will tell me all about the differences in what he has to do for his Indian clients versus for me, and how the humidity here affects your hair. And I mean, he watches, like, I guess there are not TikTokers, because they don't have TikTok in India, but YouTubers who are professional hairstylists, and they do videos on their experiences and what they do, and so he's like, this is like totally a profession for him. He's got all the facts about the chemical analysis underlying the hair care products, and it's just it's fascinating, the things that he knows that I would never in a million years think mattered, because it's just hair. But apparently that's not the case. But he does use just regular American and European products, and it's just like going to a salon back home, except they're all guys. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I've seen some of the videos where like people are doing the hair thing, and they're like doing all kinds of weird and wacky. They're like wax and lighting things on fire and all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm not that brave.
No.
I don't know how much of that is real and how much of that's just for the vid.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right. So normally we would do the religion question here, but you've been on the show dozens of times and answered it a bunch of times. So instead, what are you reading now?
Okay. So I have been having a really hard time getting myself to start reading. So like once I start reading a book, I'm doing fine, but I'll sit there and think, I don't want to look at a book. I write all day. I don't want to look at any more text. And I was starting to worry about that, because I went from reading about 200 books a year to maybe 50. And that was a big change. So a friend of mine had a reading challenge that she'd given herself, that she made up. And it was to read one book for every year that she'd been alive, that had been published in each year. So she'll end up I think she's going to end up being 60 by the time she's done, because she's doing it for like once a month. And I thought, I have a bunch of books I have never read that I own. Why don't I do something like that? So I sat down with my library database. The picture behind me is actually my library in Utah. And I pulled up the database, and I sorted everything by year and by whether I'd read it or not. And I started picking books. And I got excited about reading again. It was, I don't know what made the difference, but it was like, I don't have to sit there and stare at my shelves and think, what am I going to read? Because I've just picked it for myself. So I have been working my way through since 1972 is when I was born. And I am currently reading Ursula Le Guin's book, Wynn's 12 Quarters, which is a short story collection. And I own it, but had never read it. And so I'm way back. I'm back in, that's 1975, I think. And it's been really interesting, because I have enjoyed reading. I look forward to it. I end up having to buy a lot of things, because I'm not going to bring my library over here. It's too hefty, and some of the older books are kind of valuable, and I wouldn't want to lose them. But it means that it has to be a book I haven't read, and it has to be a book I can get access to here, either through Kindle or through the remarkably cheap Indian book selling system. So I have a bunch of books I've bought that are sitting on my bookshelf, and that's what I'm reading right now.
Nice. So I am doing my yearly work. I at least once a year I read. Generally, the end of January I read the Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I enjoy that, and I find it's pretty like a Zen moment for me to read that. Sometimes I take notes, find stuff I like. Sometimes I'll read it, the versions, because there's free versions out there. Obviously, it's well past its
I think so.
Copyright. But sometimes I'll find versions where they do like you've seen the study Bible thing, where they'll have on one page they'll have the text, on the other the kind of explanation. There are some I don't know what you'd call that model. I guess the study version. They've got one of those.
You usually call it the annotated version.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been looking for an annotated version of it, just to.
That sounds good. Yeah.
see if I can, get even stuff I'm missing. Because sometimes you miss context when you translate, because not everything translates literally. So you need the context clues and sometimes cultural references, like, and I use this example. If you've actually listened to Shakespeare in Middle English, some of the stuff that didn't quite make sense, if you listen to it in Middle English, it rhymes and it kind of has a cadence to it that, okay, that's why he did it. That would add like emotion, I guess, that's not there. You kind of gets lost in translation. I imagine there's stuff like that in just about any book that's, past a certain age. So it'd be kind of cool to get an actual linguist to break some of that down.
That would be really interesting. Yeah.
And then I've been reading Monster Punk Horizon by H.P. Hollow. So Heather's been on the show a lot. Both of her personalities, Eddie Skye and H.P. Hollow. So, and I've heard it's one of the it's a game lit, and people are like, I don't like the genre, but I like this. So I decided to give it a shot. I've read some of her other stuff and enjoyed it. So, and her husband has an excellent taste in bow ties. So most people don't rock the bow tie anymore, and I can respect the drift. Like I dig it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Now, since you are a fantasy writer, and among other things, and we are here to talk about your fantasy book series, The Dark Goddess. If you read the title of the episode, no spoilers there. What is your favorite fantasy creature?
I think I have to go totally, basic and say the dragon, because there's so many different varieties of dragon and so many different ways you can approach dragons in fiction. And I like that flexibility. I like that you can have a dragon that's intelligent and drinks tea and converses, with humans. And you can also have a dragon that's vicious and terrible and tears people's livers out. And they're both dragons, and they both are interesting in their own ways. And so, yeah, I'm going to say dragon, I think.
Okay. I've been reading a lot of kind of esoteric fantasies lately. So for me, unicorn, just because I want to know what a unicorn steak tastes like.
Oh.
Is it going to be gamey like I'm told horse meat is? Is it going to be
I
like...
bet it's gamey. I bet they make it so that, you don't hunt and kill unicorns because they don't taste good, as a protection,
But then could you ground its bones into dust and make medicine or something?
Yeah, I think a unicorn would be like one of those esoteric, weird things that people eat because they can brag about having eaten it, but it's not very good.
Yeah. So camel's like that. I've eaten camel and it is not very good. Okay. So that's your favorite creature. If you're going to start your own fantasy creature zoo, what give me a couple of ideas of what you might want in there.
Okay, so if I was going to create my own fantasy zoo, the first thing I would want would be to have it be a zoo where the animals don't know they're in the zoo. So they think they're living their best lives in some protected glen, and they don't know that people are coming and looking at them. And then I would want monsters, actually. I think fantasy creatures that are terrifying. I think it would be a scary zoo. And so you'd go in and you'd be able to see like boggarts and ogres and what else? Let me think of some other monsters. Thinking about the list of monsters I created for the new War Master book, so that I could grab a monster and plop it down and not have to stop to think about it. Things like a will-o-wisp creature, that's not so scary a monster until it's leading you off a cliff to your death. So that's the kind of zoo I would want. I would want a zoo of monstrous creatures who are just reacting naturally because they don't know they're in a zoo.
Okay. I don't know. I think like a griffin would be kind of cool. If I'm going to do it. I mean, obviously I mentioned unicorns would be fun just to eat them, but they'd make a good exhibit at a zoo too. And
I think the griffins would be I think the griffins would be a great example for a petting zoo. If you could like get a ride on a griffin, like they have, go in and pet the llama or whatever, and instead it would be griffins and baby unicorns and creatures, little fun creatures. They'd be the fun little exhibit before you get into my monster zoo. So
yeah, I think griffins would be kind of cool. Phoenix, but there's how do you contain something that's flammable?
Kind of hard. Yeah, but they'd be cool to look at.
Yeah, and but like I said, containment's in it. Well, I mean, I guess if they're magical creatures, you can have magical containment.
Yeah. Well, they're not always on fire. They burst into flame at one point in their life cycle, and then I guess they're just an ordinary bird. So you just have to watch out for that one point.
And I was going to say centaur, but I don't know. Would that be ethical because they're actually sentient?
Yeah. Well, but a dragon is too, more or less. Well, it can be, but centaurs, yeah, and the same thing with, I guess, with an ogre, because they're like humanoid and gross, but they're still humanoid creatures and sentient. So I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'd go kind of basic on those. I definitely want a Yeti. That'd be kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I don't know. There's lots of fun potential there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all right. So obviously your fantasy world, we know with you it's going to be like Dr. Pepper. Sometimes Dr. Pepper, but if you're in your fantasy world, what are your characters in the universe where the Dark Goddess series happens? What are they going to be drinking?
Okay, so in the Dark Goddess series, the setting is inspired by late Renaissance Italy. So it's the climate is the same, and the trade that they do is more or less the same. So in their world, they have coffee, but not tea. Tea hasn't reached them yet. So they drink coffee, and I think there's a point in one of the books where the bad guy offers the main character tea, and he's all like, "Yes, this is very exotic," and she's like, "Yeah, dude, I've had this before," because she travels all over the place, and so she's been to some of the cities where it's starting to be popular. But coffee is their drink of choice, based on how their trade routes went. They drink coffee, and they tend to drink it black, but most and that's mostly because for our main character who travels a lot, if she wants coffee, she's usually in a hurry. So so she tends to drink it black, but they've got the fancy coffee houses and that's how coffee is. That's how coffee is drunk in their world.
Okay. Did you test it out for science, or do you just trust that it worked?
I have tested it for science, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but my sense of taste and smell is very limited. Something that I inherited. Apparently my grandmother had the same problem, where there are a lot of things I just can't smell, and that extends to not being able to taste them. And so coffee was a huge disappointment because it smells divine. And then when I tasted it, all I tasted was bitter. There was no other flavor, no other nuance to it. It was just bitterness. And so that was hugely disappointing. But it's not going to be an issue for me whether or not I drink coffee, because I don't like it. So I don't know. I think if I were a coffee drinker, I would probably want to add a lot of stuff to it that I could taste, because I do like the like mocha flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
now that's another thing. Italy was known for chocolates, right? So
right.
Wouldn't that be an option in this fantasy? Now, is this Earth just an alternative reality version?
No.
So it's not an exact analog to Italy.
Right. All it is really is I I needed an Earth analog because I wanted to have for this series a world that I could sort of build on. And there were things about, and it's not even a Renaissance Italy analog even. It's just there were things that happened during that time culturally that I found interesting. And I don't know a lot about that period of history. Just things that I've read in other novels and things that I've studied in school. But there were things that interested me that I wanted to play with, and so I sort of used that as a background. But they, so there are some things that they have, and then some things that they don't. And I wanted city states. I wanted a strong religious presence for the way the magic works. And so I just kind of borrowed things here and there from what I remembered studying. But yeah, they have chocolate. Oh yes, they have chocolate.
Okay. So. Now, do you have chocolate where you're at? I don't know if India is known for that. I know they've got certain foods they're known for, but I don't know about chocolate.
Oh yeah, Indians love sweets, love them, and chocolate is one of the things they love. Unfortunately for me, they love milk chocolate and not so much dark chocolate. It has been really difficult, and when I get dark chocolate bars, they tend to be. I think Cadbury makes a really good dark chocolate bar that I can get easily and cheaply, but a lot of them are imports, so it's harder to get the kind of chocolate that I like, but there's plenty of chocolate. They even have like Snickers. In fact, they have flavors of Snickers that we don't get in the US, like berry and pistachio. Butterscotch Snickers is amazing.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're really good. So
you should take pictures of some of the candy bar wrappers before you eat them, so you can kind of like share them on your Discord or your Facebook or whatever.
I should do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I didn't really appreciate that fresh chocolate would taste different. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Anything's going to taste a little bit better fresh. But a friend of mine, I know this married couple, I met them in Vegas when we went there in 2017 for the 20 Books Vegas writing conference. And I met him at the bar, and then, his wife was the author, and we kind of get along. But mostly it's because he's a nerd just like me. But they were visiting Hershey, Pennsylvania, because there's that theme park / actual chocolate factory there. And so they live in Florida. So they were swinging down through Virginia, through the Tidewater area, and dropped me off literally some that had been made that morning because I met them for dinner. And I actually ate those with my niece, and we were like being all snobby, like pinky in the air as we ate it. We're like, oh, we could taste Ode to Bessie, because I mean, like, it really did taste different. Like we even went out to the store to get like the same bag, but not obviously fresh off the thing. And we would try side by side, and oh my goodness, it's different.
Wow.
So
I wouldn't have thought that, but yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, because that if it's too old, it changes, but I wouldn't have thought about like super fresh. That sounds fun.
Yeah. So now I'm like, oh man, I really want to go up to Pennsylvania to go see that, like just to visit it, just because it's kind of cool. Yeah. Although I'm not much for theme parks, they got people there.
Yeah.
But we do have in Virginia Beach, not too far from where my parents live. There's the Royal Chocolate, which like they make it all on site. And they're supposed to be getting European sipping chocolate, because I've got to introduce the kid to that.
That's good stuff.
That's like the equivalent of it. European sipping chocolate is to hot chocolate what a shot of espresso is to coffee. I think is the easiest way to explain it. I made the mistake the first time I tried it of gulping it, not gulping it, but like taking a swig like you would of a hot chocolate. And it was just so sweet, I thought my head was going to explode.
Yeah.
So we went a little sidetracked on food. We're going to play the commercial here in a minute and get back to talking about the Dark Goddess series. But one thing we will warn you about: never read Melissa's books when you're hungry or on a diet, because she writes a lot of food scenes and she gets really detailed. It's probably all the things you can't get, so you just sort of live vicariously on the page.
I do,
because we've talked about this off air and on your War Master. I almost said it on your War Master series. We talked about some of the foods that you were describing them eating is because you couldn't get it locally. So we're going to air that beautiful commercial, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk exclusively about her series.
All right.
Boom.
Here comes your next romp in the graveyard. In Hunters for Hire, a new urban fantasy adventure by best-selling author Jonathan Yanez, a guy down on his luck puts sign twirling and rideshare driving on the back burner to track down the supernatural for a pretty penny. Find out what happens when John Hunter enters the secret underworld. Download your copy and start listening today. Now available on Amazon and Audible.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. So, I don't think I've ever asked you before we get to the books, how did you get into writing? Like you've obviously always been interested in telling stories. You're a dungeon master sometimes for your friends and family, but what made you decide to transition from like, I like to do this as a hobby to like, I want to make this, make a serious go of it?
Well, it's kind of a long story, so I'll see about shortening it. But basically, the long story is that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder about 23 years ago, and it was devastating to my life. I gave up a lot of stuff I just couldn't do anymore. Everything that I'd been doing was gone. All of my hobbies, all of my professional relationships just sort of disappeared. And it took about 10 years to get things back on track with medication and therapy. And by the time I did that, I had no outlets for anything. I'd been a literary critic, a lay literary critic. I'd been involved in literary organizations, and all of those contacts were gone. And so I was looking for something to do because I had all this energy, all this creative energy. And I had written a book and it was terrible. It was really bad. It was the wrong genre. It was something I didn't really care about. It was a big mistake. And so I did all these other things. I tried making jewelry. I tried acting. I tried just a bunch of different things. And we were in a role-playing game, and I was playing a character who was a cleric of the goddess of death, the god of death. And I liked this character. I got to invent a lot of the worship and in the game, and then the game ended, and I'm like, I really like this character. I wonder if I could tell a story about her. And so I sat down and I wrote this story that turned out to be my first book, Emissary, and it was a lot of fun. And it was pretty good. I mean, it was not at all like the earlier failed book that was horrible and will never see the light of day. And I finished that, and I thought, well, I wonder if I could do it again, because I don't have a million ideas floating around in my head. I really just get one at a time, and I have to milk it. So I had another story I had been telling myself for years and years, and I wrote that. And then I thought, well, what if I could write another one? And so and it went from there. So now I'm writing my 70th book right now, and it's been amazing, the change that I never really expected to be a writer. I dabbled, I wrote short stories, I wrote, I wrote a lot of literary analysis for many years, but not in any serious way. And so the fact that I could do this and that I was telling stories that people found interesting was really a change. It was surprising. So so that's pretty much how I got into it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna while we talk about this, I'm gonna throw up. So not throw up. I'm gonna put the cover up. So this is, if you're looking at it on Amazon, it's gonna be a thumbnail. This is kind of, they do the overlap. But so this is your first book cover. I really do like the art on this, the line art, the way this is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's simple, but it's still better than what Trad Pub's doing.
I really liked that one. We had a problem with me, and this is the same company, the same designer that does the War Master books.
Okay.
And different artists, but the design company is a cooperative of artists, and so I went to them. That's why I went to them for War Masters, because they did such a good job on this one. And the first version had the wolf facing forward, and it was pretty, but it was hard to tell that it was a wolf at thumbnail size. So I had to go back afterward, because I had finalized it. I said, yeah, this is it. This is great. And then I looked at it and I thought, this is not going to work. And so I had to go back and say, can I pay you to update this, and let's change it so the wolf is not facing. And they said, yeah, okay, we can do that. And so they've been really great to work with. They took my idea of it being kind of the black and white, and made it really go. So I'm thrilled about these covers. They the fifth one, I don't think you have the fifth one, but
I actually got all of them. I just haven't gone through them yet.
Yeah,
the only thing that's not really colorblind friendly, and I know it's up here at the top, is your name, because I can see the corners of the writing on the black. But the I'm assuming that's white writing blends into the background for me. But I mean, everything else pops. So, and this is obviously the second book, which is the wolf running. It's glorious. It's still the same line art theme. The third one, if you're listening, dear listener, is the is that a waning moon or crescent moon? I can't remember.
That's the new moon. Almost. It's crescent moon. Yeah.
But with the sword, and the sword has all the details in it. That looks just glorious. The fifth one has the unicorn, so now we get to see if you're going to have some steak. And then two wolves at the bottom, but it's got this awesome tree scene. It's bright and dark, light and dark, kind of half and half, which I really like. It goes with the theme of the title of the Dark Goddess. And then here's book 5, which is the wolf again from book 2, but now you're looking at it from the other side.
Yeah. The blue wolf throughout is the werewolf companion, the main character's werewolf companion, and so I wanted her. He's not blue in the second one. He's the one running, but I wanted the artist to make sure that there was the blue wolf in all the covers as sort of the running theme. And so that fifth one there with all the other wolves looking back at him is where they meet his pack. And so there he is. Yeah.
And then you got the wolf in the I see it.
Little bitty wolf.
Yeah. I'm looking for it now that I know. I see it.
Yeah.
Obviously the main wolf.
That's just him.
And then the first one, he's on the bottom. You see the main wolf.
Yeah.
But I do like the art. So that is awesome. It does jump, pops out. Before we start talking about the series, I do have the question. So we do have some families that listen, obviously. So one of the things they like us to ask is, if you're going to use basically like the movie rating system, that G to R, I guess, how would you rate this book? So or the universe, however you want to do that, so people kind of know what they're getting.
Okay, so this is, I would say, a PG-13 series. There is sex, but it's behind closed doors, and then the lead up to. So there's
So you fade to black.
Yeah, it's fade to black pretty fast, and there's fighting, but not a ton of graphic violence on screen, and the language is pretty mild. So I would say PG-13 for this one.
And for the whole series, you think it's pretty fair assessment?
Yeah.
Okay. Is this out there? Because you and I have talked about this previously. I don't know if we were on air for it, but obviously I tend to listen to audiobooks, so that's the first thing I want to know. Does this one have an audiobook out there?
This one does not. The first book is my shortest book at 61,000 words, and that makes it really too short to be a viable audiobook. And because I'm in the middle of producing the War Master books, that's where all my audiobook money is going. But I have considered doing these as audiobooks that then get released in pairs. So like the first 2 books maybe not in pairs, because the third book is pretty long, but the first 2 books are short enough that I think I could release that as a single item, and that would be long enough to satisfy listeners. So that's a plan. It's not anything I'm ready to develop yet. The research I use Findaway Voices to distribute, and they used to have their marketplace, which is where I found my narrators, and they stopped doing that. They decided that wasn't part of their business model, which makes sense actually. And so I no longer have a go-to for finding a narrator. And I got in under the wire with our War Master narrator, and that's been really great. So it's kind of like, when you've got one extra step you have to go through, and it's already a difficult thing, and so you just don't do it. And so that extra step of having to go find the narrator is adding to, well, it's too short and it costs a lot of money, and so I would like to.
The other part of that is you got to be constantly on your game, because I can't remember if it was Find Away Voices or what. One of the podcasts I listen to is got a lady that's on there as one of the co-hosts, Veronica Jaguar. And she's my favorite commie. I don't know if she's actually a commie. I just tease her. But she's got such a voice. Like, I'd probably listen to her read the notebook, like the yellow pages, that old trope. But she talks about, on the podcast, the Dead Robot Society, she talks about, like, from the business side, because that's an author's how to author kind of thing, dear listener, if you're interested. But one of the things she talked about is some of these sites are in the back data. Like, instead of opting in, you actually have to opt out, and they're using your narrator's voice to train their AI and that kind of stuff. And so it's constantly like, I feel like you're whack-a-mole trying to make sure you're with one that's not screwing over your narrator, because they've entered into business with you in good faith, and now they have to trust that you're not going to let their voice go to replace them with robots, so to speak.
Well, I definitely do not want to do that. So
the other
I agree.
Is so that we obviously there are 5 books because we went through 5 covers. Is the series done?
No.
Okay.
The 6th book is with the editor and should be released sometime this year. It's not really on hold because I'm still working on it, but I've been writing. I can only write one thing at a time because I'm not flexible that way, and so the War Master series is taking my immediate attention. But this is intended to be an ongoing static series. So a static series is one in which the main character doesn't have a series arc of development. It's like Batman or Sherlock Holmes is a static hero.
So episodic.
Yeah, it's episodic. So this is like, it was supposed to be Ginevra, the main character, and the investigation of the week, because she's basically an investigator for the leader of her religion, and goes and figures out mysteries and solves problems, and is a diplomat, and so she does all these different adventures, and I figure I could probably go on doing that for a very long time. So I like these characters, so I will probably do that. So
let's back up a step on the Dark Goddess series. So where did you get the idea that ultimately became the series? Like, where did this come from?
Well, my second daughter loves werewolves. Like, if she could have a werewolf boyfriend, she would have a werewolf boyfriend. Her favorite series, and my favorite werewolf series actually, is Kelly Armstrong's Darkest Powers trilogy, which is a young adult urban fantasy with a fantastic werewolf, and he is a great werewolf boyfriend. He's wonderful. And so I loved that, and she loved that. And I was in between series, and I was complaining to my husband that I didn't know what to write next, because, as I said, I don't generally have a ton of ideas lying around that I can just pick between. I have to come up with something. And so I'm saying, I don't know what to do. I kind of want to write this. I kind of write this. I don't really have an idea. And he said, well, you have a daughter who would love you forever if you wrote a werewolf series. And I said, you're right, I would, but I don't write urban fantasy, because that's really where the werewolves are these days, is in urban fantasy. So our world, contemporary sort of thing. And he said, well, you don't have to make it contemporary. You can just, write about werewolves. So as I said, I was thinking about some aspects of Renaissance Italy, and specifically the idea of city-states ruling themselves, and their cultures being connected but independent in some ways. And then also the idea of a powerful religion that came in and took over from what had been there before. And so I wanted to write about a paladin. So I needed a religion, and so I started from there, and I started thinking, well, how would this work? Well, one of the things that I think needs to be addressed in fantasy, in action fantasy, is the idea of whether women are capable of fighting and competing against men in a physical way. And I think the fantasy, of course, is we want to believe in kick-ass women, which, because why wouldn't you? But the reality is that in our world, in the real world, women are generally not that strong. They have, disadvantages. So I was thinking, well, what if you had a religion that was the worship of a goddess, and all of her paladins were female, because she gave them incredible strength and ability to prove that it was her gift that did it. Because if a woman could bench press a man, like lift a man over her head, you couldn't say that that was because the woman trained really hard. That's an impossible feat, and it was something that was possible because her goddess gave her that gift. And I thought that was an interesting approach to the problem. And so that's where the dark goddess came from. The dark goddess part, the dark part, comes from how she has a twin in her sister who is the bright one, and the bright one is the evil one. She's the one that wants to control humans and take away their agency and give them destinies and expect them to just, fall in line with what she tells them to do. And the dark goddess is about freedom and choice and letting people do things even if it hurts them, because they're the ones making the decisions. And so in this world, the worshipers of the dark goddess don't believe in fate, and they don't believe in luck. So and I didn't figure that out until like the second book. So I had to go back to the third book and go, okay, did they wish each other luck here? I got to take that out. So they don't wish each other luck. That's the province of the bright one. And the bright one created werewolves to be the pinnacle of creation opposite humans, which were the dark goddess's creations. And so the werewolves are all evil right up until the main character, Ginevra, meets a werewolf that doesn't kill her. And she starts to question whether what she knows about werewolves is really true. And that's where the first book begins.
So are you familiar with the Halo lore?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so one of the things they do is, obviously, this is germane, just bear with me. One of the things they do to get these halos, they're super soldiers, are like genetically enhanced to be like 7 foot tall and all that. They kidnap actual human kids at about 5-ish who have the traits kind of they're looking for, because that's about when kids start developing their own personality, really. Right. And then they raise them from birth in a kind of, Agage style Spartan system, hence the name. But when they hit, puberty, they basically send them through like mechanical enhancements, much like they would do for the Warhammer mercenary, the Space Marines. And they basically use science to make them bigger. Now, obviously, in your world, it would be magic. Is that how she gets the paladins get their power? That once they commit, then they get to grow up? Or are they always like that and then kind of choose to live that life?
No, sorry. No, they make their oath to the dark goddess, and the dark goddess gives them the gift of strength. And the magic part is that it doesn't physically change them like visibly. You still get it'll talk about how there's some paladins that are kind of short, and a couple paladins that don't really look like they could give you a fight. But they all have this enhanced strength that's magically induced. So rather than their bodies being affected, it's more like a magical boost that comes from nowhere, basically. But it's a function of the oath to the dark goddess. And then if they break their oaths, they lose that. They lose all the enhancements they get, which is like better vision. They get everybody in the world who worships the dark goddess gets what's called a grace, which is a piece of black stone that they wear, and it gives them access to certain small magics like lighting a fire or finding your way home. And for paladins and for the anointed, who are the priests, the gifts are different. So for a paladin, you get the gift of being even stronger. You can gain a boost of strength, or you can hear truth when it's told, or they're just different things that you get as a result of worshiping. So all of this, everything that the magic is, it's like the opposite of War Master, where in War Master there's no god. In this world, there's only one kind of magic, and it's divine. So there are no wizards. There's just the divine magic.
I mean, you could argue that the system becomes God, but that's another.
Well, argument. I'm not gonna weigh in on that one. That one you will have to see.
So I am not surprised that if you've given the meaning of the seventh child, that your seventh daughter is the one.
No, second daughter.
Oh, second. I thought you said seventh. I'm like, okay, that's
no. I'm sorry. That's a kind of Mormon I'm not.
No, I just the myth of the seventh child or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I thought kind of fitting that's
that
the one that likes.
That would be really fitting.
But so obviously you have it slightly different in that the light is bad and dark is good. Mm-hmm. Kind of flip that paradigm on its head. What made you decide to go that route? Because it's kind of counterintuitive.
I think it was because it was counterintuitive. I liked the idea. Well, okay, for example, werewolves are tied to the moon. Okay, just as a matter of lore, that's a basic werewolf thing. You, me, anybody. Okay, so I was thinking about how that means that they're, we think of them as being creatures of the dark, but really, the full moon is pretty bright, and that's quite a bit of light. What if we turned that around? What if we said that when it's full dark, you have protection, because that's when the werewolves don't roam? And so I kind of went from there to say that the dark of the moon is where the dark goddess's power is greatest and the bright one is at her weakest. And so the full moon is, if they believed in luck, they would consider it a bad omen. It's certainly when the werewolves are out, and that's where that came from. Is just that idea. Well, no, this is different. Let's turn this around. Let's make readers have to think about what it means to be good, what it means to be evil. Let's not code it traditionally with light is good and dark is bad. Let's turn that around so that it is not a simple reaction, so that you're always conscious of who the bad guys are and what they're doing. So like in the fourth book, the unicorn is this bright white creature, and is a creature of the bright one, the evil goddess. And it's not so much a harbinger of doom as that every time you see it, something bad does happen. So it's not like bad luck. It's just like you see the unicorn, and then like an hour later you walk into a nest of monsters or something. It's a warning. So I liked playing with that. It was, not only did I think it was interesting for readers, it was interesting for me because it kept me thinking. I could never just default to what was traditional. I had to think it through about, well, if the bright one is like this, then there's no destiny. There's no, how would you talk about what you were going to do with your life if you couldn't think in terms of, well, I have a destiny to do this, because that's not how they do it. That's just not for a believing person. So it was. So I think it was a conscious choice to do something a little different, and then see how that fit with everything else.
Given that your second, not seventh, second, number two, your second daughter kind of inspired you to do the werewolf angle, which is where kind of the genesis of this universe, did you make her a named character?
I did not. She is actually in one of my other series, the Last Oracle Contemporary Fantasy series. She's actually a character in that series. So for this one, I just made her her very own werewolf boyfriend.
Okay. So obviously there's magic, but you said, magic comes from the gods or goddesses, I guess, in this case.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of tech do they have?
They are fairly low tech. They are, so far, I haven't gotten them to the places that are a little higher tech. The story has been confined to the part of the peninsula that would be upper, like northern Italy, is physically. I borrowed from the map to write that up, but I populated out the world. And so overseas to the east, there's a much more technologically. That's where their worship comes from. Their faith comes from a country over the east, and that's a little more technologically savvy. But they have understanding of things like botany and growing foods. There's trade back and forth, so you get chocolate and tomatoes. You get one of the things that I write about in all my books is the connection between technology and magic. Like, if you have the ability to light a fire using an invocation to your goddess, and it always works and isn't dependent on anything else, except for like if you've sinned terribly and are no longer in her grace, would you ever develop a lighter? Would you need to? And so what interests me is the ways in which magic as technology takes the place of technology as technology. To see, here's this thing that we take for granted as a tech that they do with magic. And so it interests me to look at those kind of intersections. And is that I think there are people who would question whether that's still magic if it is just perfectly reliable and works. Isn't that just a form of technology itself? So for this series, the fact that it's all tied to the worship of the dark goddess kind of goes into that question a little bit differently, which is if it's divine, that's what's given you this power is divine, then what does that mean for other technology? Does that mean that people who don't worship the dark goddess will develop things that fill those needs that the worshipers don't have? So right now, like I said, this is meant to be kind of an ongoing, longer series. And right now, they have not encountered anything high tech. Even for their era, it's still not. It's not medieval. It's post medieval. But yeah. So that's where I stand on the technology question. Is what does that mean if you're going to have an intersection of magic and tech? I think that's an interesting question.
Okay. So you say late medieval, late Renaissance. So they had gunpowder. Do you have gunpowder in this world?
Yes, they do. And
So
the
they have-
paladins, they have single shot pistols. They do not have revolvers or anything, repeaters. What am I looking for?
So flintlock style weapons, like the American
Yes.
Revolution.
Yeah, silver shot, because they use them against the paladins are specifically bred to, well, not bred to, but intended to fight the Bright One's monsters, because ordinary humans really can't. And so they are armed with swords and pistols. The pistols have silver shot. They fight werewolves when they can, right up until my main character discovers that it's not what she thinks. But yeah, I did. I wrote historical fantasy set in the Napoleonic era. And so I wanted to make use of some of what I learned about weaponry for guns. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? They have guns. It's not going to be, medieval. They have guns.
Okay. What about the main character? What can you tell us if you dive a little bit deeper into her name and like what can you tell us about her?
Her name is Ginevra Castleline, and she is the youngest daughter of a family of 4 boys and her. And she always wanted to be a paladin. That's all she ever wanted to do. Her father's a blacksmith. The paladin's weapons and armor undergo a process of silvering that coats them with a kind of silver that is inimical to werewolves. And so her father's a blacksmith and was doing that, silvering armor and weapons for all these paladins in and out of his smithy all day. And she just always wanted to be a paladin. And at the beginning of the book, she is on a mission with her paladin company, and one of her sister, her riding partner, they pair them up so you have like someone who watches your back. And her riding partner is possessed by a spirit, and she has to kill her, and shoots her. And the grace that she wears, which is, like I said, the piece of stone or black glass that all worshipers wear, shatters. And that only ever happens if you do something to break your oaths and lose the dark goddess's favor, except she hasn't. She still has all her strength and all her enhancements. And they send her to a little town to sort of recover, a town that's reported a lot of monster sightings. And she's supposed to, deal with the monsters, find out what's going on, maybe take a little break and see what happens. And that's where she meets this werewolf. She's attacked by a werewolf and nearly killed, and this other werewolf saves her life. And it takes her a while to get used to the idea that maybe he's not so evil, but everything she's ever been taught is that werewolves are the Bright One's servants. They are evil, no question. So why would he ever help her? Not only her, but someone who is sworn to kill his kind. And so that's the beginning of the first story, Silver and Shadow. And she ends up becoming his friend, and then they end up falling in love because he has to be a good werewolf boyfriend, and you don't have that unless they fall in love. And then they are companions, and they investigate and fight monsters together.
So in some parallel, it almost sounds like wolf is their primary form and they're human. If they're a werewolf, they shift. Is there secondary? Is that a fair assessment?
No, actually, it's that they are neither one nor the other completely. So, like, for example, they don't have a middle, werewolf raw form. They're either wolf or human. And if you kill a werewolf in its wolf shape, it doesn't revert to human, and vice versa. It's just whatever they are at the moment, that's what they are. They're wolf or they're human appearing.
Okay. Do you have any secondary characters that you really liked in this one?
Well, the secondary, okay. So Ginevra and Aodin is the werewolf. I borrowed a lot of Celtic influences for naming the werewolves, and wanted something that sounded very different from the more Italian influenced names. But Aodin is the werewolf companion, and he is a physician. That sort of happened. He treats her because she's badly wounded by this other werewolf. And so he treats her wounds, and turns out that he's a physician. And I'm like, why would he be a physician? That sounds crazy. But it was the idea that came to me. And it's been an interesting challenge because I want him to be competent, but I don't want to fall into the whole, he knows all about germs and he knows all about all this stuff that, that if this were our world in that time period, he wouldn't necessarily know any of this. And so I'm like balancing what I want him to do with, all right, they don't have germ theory. They don't have I don't know what else, but making him the physician was a lot of fun and an interesting challenge, because it gave him something he could do that wasn't just being Ginevra's, friend and partner and boyfriend. And then the other character that I really like is the Blessed, who is the leader of their religion. She's like their pope, and she is the daughter of one of the noble houses of one of these city-states, and she became the leader through however it is they choose their leader. It's not like Roman Catholic, but it's not far different from Roman Catholic either. So she represents the force of belief, and what I wanted for her, what I really wanted, was to have them finally, talk to her and say, okay, I know what you taught us about werewolves, but you have to understand it's all wrong, and have her go, yeah, you're right, we didn't understand that, let's change that, instead of being knee-jerk reaction. I wanted a good religion, basically. I didn't want to do a religious faith that was full of hidebound, tradition-oriented people who were all in it for their own good, and who didn't really believe in the goddess. And so I wanted the Blessed to be someone that you could feel justified in following, someone who was worthy of giving your allegiance to. And so that's where she ended up being. And then there are other secondary characters that go on through this. Since it is episodic, it's not so much recurring characters. So there's like new ones for each book. But the Blessed is the one who is consistent throughout.
So you kind of used the Pope as a stand-in for the leader of the Dark Goddess's church. Does that mean we're going to get the Swiss Guard in their nice pantaloons?
No,
Man,
no, just Paladin. Sorry,
those uniforms are sexy now. I mean, we can make that. We can make that have a comeback.
Yeah, that's true. We could resurrect it.
And so the bad guy obviously is the Dark Goddess and her monsters, or is there a specific antagonist?
The Bright Goddess and her monsters are the bad guys. Yeah, she is the bad guy. In each book, there are different antagonists. So one of the things I was doing was kind of a monster of the week thing, where the first three books, well, okay, not the first book, but the second, third, and fourth book all have a sort of like a monster that Ginevra has to face, whether it's whether she knows it or not. I mean, in some cases, she doesn't know what she's going up against, but the Bright Goddess is the creator of all monsters, all evil, and so Ginevra's primary purpose as a paladin is to fight the monsters. She is also a prime of the Blessed, which makes her sort of a religious agent who goes out and solves the problems that the Blessed has that a company of paladins can't solve. So like in the second book, people are disappearing in a city, and Ginevra's job is to find out why and where they're going. So there's always something going on. Mostly it's complicated. Humans are complicated, and so sometimes you'll think that there's a person who's the bad guy, and maybe he's just a little misunderstood, or maybe his desires aren't as far off from hers as you thought. So there's always something complicated going on.
So if you've got a Pope analog, does that mean you have the Illuminati?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I wonder if there's a possibility for a counter group. I mean, the thing about the worship of the Dark Goddess is, and the worship of any fantasy god, any fantasy religion, you come up against, for me, most often the question of faith of, well, if you have evidence, hard evidence that the God is working in your life, it's kind of hard to have the question, well, do I believe or don't I? I mean, you get into Terry Pratchett territory where they know the gods exist, they just don't worship them. And so the idea of working behind the scenes, when you have a god who is telling you what to do, the dark goddess is I mean, she, as much as she ever interferes in human lives, but when you have the dark goddess available to you, someone that you can, see the evidence of their work in your lives, is there really a need for somebody working behind the scenes, secret organizations? But that makes me wonder. I don't know. I haven't done that, so I'll have to think about it.
All right. Now you got book 6 idea, or 7, I guess, because you've already written book 6.
7, right. Uh-huh.
So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could live in this world, because well, first off, is there anything we didn't ask you about the world? I feel like we've covered everything, but is there anything you would tell us before I asked the wrap-up stuff?
Well, the only thing I can think of is we were talking about the food in my books, and yes. This one was particularly hungry making because I like Italian food, and so I did some research into, well, what did they have and when, in terms of tomatoes, for example, because you get pasta and wouldn't always have had pasta with tomato sauce, and there's that, and there's like they live on the coast, and so there's fish, and there's deep fried fish, and roast pork with honey in the mountains, and well, not in the mountains, but near the mountains. And so one of my favorite things to do, I think this was the series where I really realized that I enjoyed writing about food because I like eating. And so this was where I really started focusing on, okay, I'm definitely going to make this delicious. I'm going to make this appealing. Anyway, so that's where this started. Really, the thing about me writing the food into books is with this series. So there's a little tidbit for you.
Okay. If you could live in this world, would you?
If I could be a paladin, yeah, sure. I think I would. They have enough indoor plumbing to suit my needs, and I think being a paladin would be an interesting, fun challenge. It would be you'd be actively doing something to save others, and that is kind of appealing. And being super strong and fit, that would be really cool. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. So do your part. It really does matter. And obviously, you sell directly. So can they buy these directly from your website as well as Amazon?
Yes. I have a shop front. You can buy them from me. You can buy them from Amazon. The ebooks are available everywhere, pretty much. Barnes and Noble, Kobo, etc. Print books available through Amazon and through my website. And yeah.
All right. So where could listeners and viewers at home find you on the Wild Wild interwebs?
Okay, my website is melissamcshanewrites.com. Someday I will get it changed to just be Melissa McShane, but that today is not that day. melissamcshanewrites.com is where you can find information about all my books and the access to my storefront. I'm also on Facebook and X, and I review all the books for my reading project on Goodreads as Melissa McShane.
All right, I don't know if I have your Goodreads. Let me add that.
That's a new one. Yeah. Well, because I don't really use Goodreads like as an author. I don't do it for authorly reasons. I just have a bunch of friends, and I, write reviews for them, and they write reviews for me. So just, stuff we're reading. So I just thought, maybe you'd be interested in seeing what I'm reading.
All right, well, I will get that link and we will share that with you in the show notes, dear listener. You can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, maybe, we don't know, the Twitters, the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades Podcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, save the shenanigans from Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, the Twitters, and the emails. You can find us on our website, also linked over there on the Spotify, on the Linktree. Or you could support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee until they can't drink anymore, and then I'll force it down their gullets, and we'll film it for your enjoyment because I'm evil that way. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We will indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, we're going to hit the end button. Thank you for coming on, Melissa. This was fun.
Thank you. This was fun.
All right. Don't cuss yet. Wait.